When you're ready to start your side, make sure you grab the appropriate wood. You don't want to mix it up with the wrong species or you'll be paying either a lot more or it's just not the wood that you wanted. But here's my list, and as you can see, all of the numbers are right here. So I've got all these checked off for the web frames and the shelf. That's all put together and cut and ready to go. But these are all solid wood. They're cut a little bit differently than the particle board that we've been using, the sheet material. Whenever you cut these, your first cut on the upcut saw right here, you want to make sure to add 1 inch to the length. Make sure to add 1 inch to the length. It's a rough board. We don't have a good working edge yet, so always have that extra inch at first. Now we'll cut it off later, but we need that inch to be able to square it up. So here is my piece of wood. I'm using poplar. Poplar is something we're going to use only if we're going to color the wood something else. You can see the red paint on the end. That's a sign, an obvious sign that this hasn't been cut. This is still cut from the mill. We need to chop that off. Now look at it, and I know you can't see on the video, on the camera right there, but I'm taking a good look at it on the other side, and I see a crack. It's called a check. The crack goes in about 2 inches, so I want to cut off an extra inch, about 3. I just don't want people cutting off like 6 or 8 inches and wasting a ton of wood. Only cut off what it will take to get rid of the defect. In my case, it's around 2.5 to 3 inches, and I'll take my best guess.
As you cut, try really hard to maximize what you can get out of the board, and always remember to mark it off your paper as you go. That way you don't end up with too much wood. Joint the best edge, and if you need to joint it again, go ahead. You need to make sure to get as many defects out as possible. Set your table saw to cut width. In this case, you can cut exactly to width, don't add anything extra on. Set the fence correctly and make sure to use a push stick if the board is really narrow. Now it's time to cut your boards to length. Make absolutely sure that as you're cutting, you trim one end first, then slide down to your stop and cut off the other end. That way you have 2 square ends. This needs to be repeated on all of your pieces. For pieces that are exactly the same size, feel free to stack them if you need to. That way you know they're cut to exactly the same length and it takes a little less time.
I've got both of my panels set up in the clamps. Here's one panel here and one panel there, but since I've got clamps big enough, I'm just going to glue them at the same time. Just simply remember, don't put glue in between them. Now this panel is made up of 3 pieces and this one too. Doesn't matter, they could be made up of a dozen pieces each and it would actually be stronger because the glue joints are that strong. But just keep in mind, as long as I've got the width that I need, I think it's the 13 3/4 for me, as long as you got the width, you're fine. Doesn't matter how many pieces it takes. So glue them up and then get them all clamped together.
As you glue, put nice thick beads of glue on there. It's better to have too much than too little. As you do big panels, clamp up one end and get all the boards perfectly flat. Then move across. Next do the center. And you can see my left hand is pulling the wood up and down to get it perfect in the middle. I'm not worried about the end yet, just the center. Get that clamped up. Once you have that done on the end, you may need a small clamp to help get the end of the board perfectly flat. Crank down on all your clamps and then move your piece off the table.
Here are your 2 sides that you have cut out. We finally cut everything to length and width and everything is ready. We of course need to do some shaping, some routing around the inside, but what I wanted to show you is that these 2 have to be mirror images of each other. We have the 2 thinner boards on the inside, the 2 wider boards on the outside. If you don't do that and you accidentally put it like this, I now have 2 left sides. and that's going to haunt you to the end of days because you're the one that'll see it most. Make sure when you glue it together, that's when we worry about it, that one of them has the small board on the right, the other one has it on the left, and so that they are mirror images. Now we're going to go and shape them so that we can put them together.
Go to shaper number 1 and take your boards and look at both sides. Figure out which one you like best and mark it with an X. This is critical so that you don't cut with the wrong face down. If you do, you'll have to start over. Push your board tight against the backing board and push them both across the blade as straight as you can. Reverse it and do it again. Repeat this on your wider boards as well.
When it's time to put the actual shape of the cathedral that we want on here, you need to grab the right pattern. Now I've got a whole mess of these in the back, everything from 6 inches up to 17. Now this one happens to do any board that's between 13 and 17 inches long. My pieces are 13 3/4. So this is the one I want, but make sure you find the right size, otherwise it doesn't quite fit correctly. So we're only going to put them on the 2 wide ones. Now, here's the X that I just put on there, right there. I need that X down, just like it was on the shaper table, and then you set this on top of it. The tricky part is, you've got to center it here and here. And it's not too hard. You just take a tape measure, that's at about 2 3/8. And we do the same over here. That's about 2 1/2, and I just need to move it down about a 1/16, about right there. All right, push it all the way back, and then tap down on it. These little screws will stick into it so it holds on to it a little bit. Then you simply take a pencil and trace it. Nice and dark so you can see it. All right, there's one, and we do exactly the same thing to the other one. When you're done tracing it, cut it out on the bandsaw, stay away from the line.
Take your pieces to the bandsaw and make sure to cut away from your line. It's better to be further away than too close. Then repeat on all remaining pieces.
Now that you've finished cutting these on the bandsaw, you need that pattern that we used a second ago to actually draw the lines. So I'm going to put them back in the screws. We're at shaper number 5. If you look right here, you can see a number 5 on the end. Make sure to open that up so the dust collector will work. And then this is the one that'll give the profile. So we lay one aside, line those screws back up, and you should be able to feel it go right in. Press down, and then run across from the right to the left. If you go the wrong way, it'll shoot across the shop, probably break your piece. Also, we want to ease into the bearing. So this bearing will stop eventually. So start here on the corner. Don't start here on the side, because again, it'll want to shoot off. Start on the corner and ease into it. Hold it down and push in. There we go. Also, make sure the X was down. No sawdust under. Line it up and cut your last one.
Last step before you can assemble, run your stiles and your straight rails through one edge of shaper number 2. Make absolutely sure that the X you put on earlier is facing down. Now take your center panels out of the clamps and scrape them off on both sides. Run your panels through the planer on both sides to make them both flat. Try your best to keep it as close to the 13/16 mark as you can. Set up the wide belt sander and set it so that you can run your boards through on both sides. It may take more than twice. If it helps, take a pencil and draw some lines on it. When those are gone, you've done it right. Now trim one end off of your panels, just enough to get it flat. Then take your pencil and mark the edge you cut from and the end you cut. Mark the edge and the end. Take your panels to the table saw, cut them to both length and width.
Now you're ready to mark the panels with the corresponding side to what we did on your rails on the other piece. So all you got to do, take your panels that have now been cut to size, and you're going to put these on there in the same way that you did before. The gaps on the end have to be even, and I need it flush on top. Now, there's one other thing. It's too easy to have it crooked one way or another. So if you measure down 1 3/4, I'll just put a line here on the side, another one right here. That's the distance from the top of this to the top edge of that, vertically. Okay, so I need to figure this out left and right. Quick tape measure, we'll figure that out. That's about 3/4, and that's about 3/4. Okay, good. And they're on the line and flush or just a hair under the top edge, and that's fine. I just don't want this sticking up too high. Whack it down, trace it like you did before, and then cut it out on the bandsaw. Now the last part in shaping the outside of the panel that you have bandsawed, and you did a really good job of staying off the line. You got to stay away from the line, is we need to trim the end off. Now it's similar to what we do on the sides, but it is shaper number 6. You can see right here, shaper 6. Make sure you use the right one. If you accidentally use shaper number 5, which is on this side, you've got to start all over. Your panel is pretty much ruined. So shaper number 6 is the straight one. So all we got to do is take that jig that we used to do the shape and put it back in the nail holes right there, tap it down. This bearing will ride along the top edge of this and shape the top perfect. That way you don't have to sand anything, and that's what we want. Now because this makes a whole lot of sawdust, I tend to put this little cover on and kind of catches it and puts it into the exhaust system. Take your time and ease into it. So I'm going to start on the end. That bearing will stop moving, and then go really slow out the end. Even if it burns your wood on the end, it doesn't matter if that's burned because you're never going to see it. Now we're on our last shaper, at least for the panel. This one is shaper number 3. And this is the one that does what's called the scoop cut. It does the scooping action on the edges, so it actually fits in your stiles and rails. Now this is the one that I didn't let anybody as a beginner use, but I want you advanced guys to get a chance to try it out. Now the way that it's set up is there's 2 blades. There's one big one on the bottom and a smaller one at the top, and in between them there is a bearing, a ball bearing inside that the edges of this rides on. So there's no way to cut too much on this machine. You got to keep it in there tight. Pushing it in harder does not mean you're cutting more. If you back out and cut less, well then you just go over it again. So it's not the end of the world. But your job is to hold it tight. Now, if you look at this fence, you see that this side is much further in than this side. The reason for that is for this cathedral, I can dig this in and it gives me room to go around this arc right here. So pick your best side. I like that one. I see a little knot right here that I don't like, so I want that towards me. My best side is down, always down on all these shapers. And you want to ease into it and push it across, just like this. It's very loud, it makes a lot of sawdust. Make sure to get rid of that sawdust without putting your hand in there. as I'm cutting, I leave my hand close to the blade because I want my pressure here where the blade is cutting. I don't want it way over here. I could rock it and it'll come up and down, give you an uneven cut. The last part before you glue anything together is dry fit it. Put it together without any glue to make sure it fits. There aren't many things more annoying than getting glue on all your parts, ready in the clamps, and then realize they're the wrong size. Now, like I said before, when you glue these sides, you need to make sure that the narrow one is on one side, the wide one is on the other. In this case, I put the narrow one on the right, so when I dry fit this, I need it on the left, opposite. All right, so make sure you put it together right. If you dry fit it together right, chances are you'll glue it together correctly too. All right, everything seems to fit together fine. I know these don't match up, but that's fine. I'm looking for gaps where the panels are. They're opposite each other. Now we're going to glue it. When you're ready to glue, I wanted to show you the end of one of your rails. So I show you where to put the glue. No glue ends up here at all in any of these 4 pieces around your panel. You're only going to glue where this touches a stile, where this rail goes into the stile. We're going to put a little bit of glue on all 3 sides of this pin right here. So a little on the back here, a little on the end of that pin, and some on the inside. That's it. That's all the glue you're going to need on this. Now, of course, you repeat that for this end and you do it on both ends of the small one. But that's it. I don't want any glue touching the panel. The panel needs to be able to expand and contract. If you limit that, if you glue it in and don't let it, it will crack.
Start by gluing the top rail, then put your panel in. Next, glue the end of the bottom rail. Once that's in place, glue the other 2 ends of your rails and put the remaining stile on. Doing it this way allows gravity to help hold the side together while you're assembling. When you put your clamps on, make sure that they are exactly across where the joint is. Clamping in the center of your panel doesn't do any good at all. After your sides have dried, take them out of the clamps and scrape them. Next, run them through the wide belt sander as many times as it takes to get them to the thickness that you're after. Your main goal is to make it so that area is flat. Where the stiles and rails come together, you don't want to feel any kind of bump or joint. Take your sides to the table saw and trim off just the top edge. The idea is to take off as little as possible to make it flat, and remember to mark the end and the edge of what you're cutting. Repeat on the other side, marking the end and the edge. Last step is take your sides to the table saw and cut them to length. Once you finish this, your sides are ready for the dados and the rabbets.